Hello everyone. In part 1, we understood the basic ideas of democracy and how democratic institutions work. Now, in part 2, we are going to take our understanding a step further and see how democracy actually works in India. We will look at India's huge electoral participation, the role of citizens, different forms of participation, the different levels of government, and how the constitution protects the diversity of our country. So let's continue our chapter and understand Indian democracy in a very simple way. Separation of powers. The separation of powers among the legislature, executive and judiciary, each with distinct responsibilities, enables democratic institutions to function effectively and responsibly. The legislature makes laws, the executive implements them, and the judiciary interprets them, thereby preventing the concentration of power in any one organ. This separation is essential for maintaining checks and balances among the three organs of the government. For example, while Parliament has the power to amend the Constitution, the judiciary can review such amendments to ensure they are consistent with the spirit of the Constitution. Similarly, the executive power of enforcement agencies is regulated by laws and rules framed by the Parliament and can also be reviewed by competent courts. If a law is inconsistent with the constitutional provisions, the judiciary has the power to declare it unconstitutional. So, democracy also depends on something called separation of powers. The government has three main organs: legislature, executive and judiciary. Each one has a different job. The legislature, mainly Parliament, makes the laws. The executive implements those laws and the judiciary interprets the laws and checks whether they are consistent with the Constitution. Now, why do we separate these powers? Because we don't want all the power to be concentrated in one place. For example, Parliament can make or amend laws, but that doesn't mean that it has unlimited power. The judiciary can review whether a constitutional amendment is consistent with the Constitution. And similarly, the executive cannot simply use its power. Its actions are controlled by laws and can also be reviewed by courts. So, each organ keeps a check on the others. The system is called checks and balances. And if a law goes against the Constitution, the judiciary can declare it unconstitutional. So, remember, separation of power means power is divided among the legislature, executive and judiciary so that no single organ becomes too powerful. The judiciary upholds the Constitution and plays a vital role in protecting and promoting democratic values and the rights of all sections of the society. It ensures the laws enacted by the Parliament of India and the state legislative assemblies are in accordance with the Constitution. The judiciary is an impartial and independent institution that safeguards citizens' rights and upholds the spirit of the Constitution. Important initiatives such as public interest litigation (PIL) have also been taken by the judiciary from time to time to ensure access to justice for all. Public interest litigation, a legal action initiated in a court of law for the enforcement of public interest. This is also another important concept, public interest litigation or PIL. Usually, a person goes to court when their own rights or interests are affected. But in a public interest litigation, a person can approach the court for an issue that affects the public interest. That means something that concerns or benefits the public. So, PIL is a legal action initiated in a court of law for the enforcement of public interest. Remember, the main focus here is not just one individual, but an issue affecting the public. So now, what is the role of a judiciary in a democracy? The judiciary has a very important responsibility. It upholds the Constitution and protects the rights of all sections of society. One of its important functions is to make sure that the laws made by the Parliament and state legislative assemblies are in accordance with the Constitution. In other words, even the law-making bodies have to follow the Constitution. The judiciary is also impartial and independent. This means it should take decisions fairly and independently without being influenced by other authorities. By doing this, the judiciary safeguards the rights of citizens and protects the spirit of the constitution. The judiciary has also taken important initiatives to make justice accessible to all. One such initiative is public interest litigation or PIL. Through PIL, matters concerning public interest can be brought before the court, helping people seek justice even in matters affecting the wider society. So, the main idea is the judiciary protects the constitution and the rights of citizens. It checks whether the laws made by parliament and state legislatures follow the constitution. Since the judiciary is independent and impartial, it can protect people's rights fairly. It also helps people get justice through initiatives like public interest litigation or PIL. Accountability and transparency. Democratic governments are accountable to citizens. Through elections, public debates, and engagement with civil society, citizens can evaluate the actions of the government. This continuous public involvement strengthens democracy and builds trust between the government and the people. Several institutional and policy frameworks ensure accountability and transparency in the Indian democratic system. For example, the Right to Information, that is RTI Act 2005, allows citizens to seek information from government agencies. You will learn more about this later in this chapter. So, democracy is not only about choosing a government through elections. The government must also be answerable to the people. This is called accountability. For example, after the government is elected, people can still question its decisions, discuss its actions, and express their opinions through public debates and civil society. So, the government cannot simply do whatever it wants. It has to be answerable to the citizens. Now, what is transparency? Transparency means that the government should be open about its work and citizens should be able to get information about what the government is doing. One important example is the Right to Information or RTI Act 2005. Under this, citizens can seek information from government agencies. When citizens can question the government and get information about its work, they can better understand and evaluate its actions. This continuous involvement of citizens makes democracy stronger and helps to build trust between the government and the people. So remember, accountability simply means that the government is answerable to the people. Since the people elect the government has a responsibility to explain and justify its actions. And transparency means the government should be open about its work and citizens should be able to get information about what the government is doing. Next is multi-party system. In the multi-party system, several political parties contest elections representing diverse voices and interests. This gives people the power to choose those they consider most suitable. Each political party is guided by certain ideas, values, and principles that shape its policies and actions. In elections to the parliament or state assemblies, the party or a coalition of parties that secures more than 50% of the seats forms the government, while the largest opposing group becomes the opposition. Political parties represent a wide range of socio-cultural, political, ideological, and regional interests, reflecting the diversity of Indian society. They function within the framework of rules and regulations laid down by the Representation of the People Act 1951. So now let's understand another important feature of Indian democracy, the multi-party system. In a multi-party system, many political parties contest elections. Each party may represent different ideas, values, interests. Why is this important? Because it gives people a choice. When elections takes place, people can choose the political party or candidate they think is most suitable. Now, every political party has its own ideas, values, and principles. These influence the policies and actions of that party. After the elections, the party or coalition of parties that gets more than 50% of the seats forms the government. Coalition means two or more parties join together to form a government. Suppose no single political party gets enough seats to form the government on its own. In that situation, two or more parties may come together and join hands to form the government. This group of parties is called a coalition. So, what happens to the other major group? The largest group that does not form the government becomes the opposition. The opposition plays an important role by questioning and examining the government's actions. India is a very diverse country. People have different cultures, different social backgrounds, different political ideas, and different needs depending on the region they live in. Political parties represent these different interests and viewpoints of people. For example, some parties may focus more on the interest of a particular region, while others may focus on particular social or political ideas. So, having different political parties allows different voices and interests in Indian society to be represented in democracy. That is why political parties reflect the diversity of Indian society. And finally, political parties cannot function completely on their own rules. They have to work according to the rules and regulations laid down by the Representation of People Act 1951. The Representation of the People Act 1951 is a law that provides rules for elections and regulates how the electoral process is conducted. Political parties have to function within the rules laid down by this law. Next is safeguarding the rights of vulnerable groups. It is the duty of the government to protect all communities regardless of caste, gender, religion or regional background. Given historical factors that have led to an unequal distribution of opportunities and resources, it is essential for the government to ensure that resources are distributed equitably, especially to the most vulnerable sections of society without discrimination. For example, Article 46 of the Constitution states that the state shall promote with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of the people and in particular of the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes and shall protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. Vulnerable groups are people who may be at greater risk of being treated unfairly or may have fewer opportunities in society. So, they may need extra protection and support. In a democracy, the government has a duty to protect all people. It should not treat people differently because of their caste, gender, religion, or the region they come from. But there is one important thing we need to understand. Not everyone has had the same opportunities in the past. Because of inequalities in the past, some groups did not get the same chances for education, jobs, or other resources. So, if some people have been disadvantaged for a long time, the government has to make sure that they also get a fair chance. This is why the government must distribute resources fairly, especially to people who are more vulnerable. And this should be done without discrimination. The Constitution also gives special protection to weaker sections. Article 46 says that the government should give special attention to the educational and economic interests of weaker sections, especially the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. It also says that they should be protected from social injustice and exploitation. So, in simple words, a democratic government must protect everyone. But if some groups are at a disadvantage, the government must give them special attention and make sure they get fair opportunities and protection from injustice. Don't miss out. The real strength of democracy lies in its citizens, their participation, awareness of duties and rights, and commitment to honesty and fairness. Without these, no democratic process or institution can function effectively or deliver meaningful outcomes. The table on the next page highlights how different democratic processes are supported by specific institutions and the values they promote. So, we have talked about democratic institutions and how they work. But there is something even more important, the citizens themselves. A democracy can have elections, parliament, courts, and all the necessary institutions. But these institutions cannot work properly if the citizens do not participate. Citizens also need to know their rights and duties and use them responsibly. They should also value honesty and fairness in public life. For example, if people participate responsibly, understand their rights and duties, and act honestly and fairly, democracy becomes stronger. But the citizens are not aware, do not participate, or do not act responsibly, even the best democratic institutions may not produce meaningful results. So, the real strength of democracy is not only its institutions, it is also its citizens. So now this table brings together the different ways in which democracy works. The table has 3 columns. The first column tells us about the democratic process, what is happening in democracy. The second column tells us about the institution that supports that process. And the third column tells us about the democratic value that this process promotes. Let's understand each one slowly. First is the legislative process. Legislative process means the process of making laws. Parliament, state legislatures and local bodies are involved in this process. This process gives people representation because their elected representatives speak for them. It also involves deliberation, which means discussing an issue carefully before making a decision. And there can be dissent, which means some people may disagree with the decision or opinion. Next is the electoral process. This is the process through which people choose their representatives by voting. The Election Commission of India supports this process. Elections encourage participation because people take part in choosing their representatives. They also promote equality because every citizen's vote has value. Next is the judicial process. This is connected with the works of courts. Courts help make sure that the rule of law is followed. This means everyone has to follow the law. Courts also help protect equality and justice. Next is the participatory processes. Democracy does not mean that people participate only during elections. People can also take part by discussing issues, expressing their opinions, and raising their concerns. The media and civil society support this kind of participation. Civil society refers to the voluntary groups, NGOs, and community associations that function interdependently within society. So, civil society means groups of people who come together voluntarily to work for different causes or issues in society. These can include NGOs, community groups, and other voluntary organizations. For example, a group of people may come together to work for education, the environment, helping people in need, or solving a local problem. And these groups are not part of the government. They work independently, but they are part of society and can take part in public issues. So, in simple words, civil society means people coming together voluntarily to work for issues that matter to society. And participatory processes promotes debate, discussion, and freedom of expression. Next are accountability mechanisms. Remember, accountability means that the government should be answerable for what it does. And the institutions like the Controller and Auditor General or CAG, the Central Information Commission or CIC, the Lokpal and the Central Vigilant Commission or CVC. These institutions help keep a check on government work in different ways. The democratic value given here is transparency. Transparency means that government work should not be hidden from the people. People should be able to get information and know what the government is doing. Next is decentralization. Imagine that every local decision had to be taken by the government at the top. It would be very difficult. So, some powers and responsibilities are given to local bodies. This allows people to take part in decisions about their own local areas. That is why the value here is people's participation at the grassroots level. Grassroots level simply means the local level, the place where people actually live. Finally, we have federalism. India has more than one level of government. There is the central and the states, and powers are divided between them. This division of powers is guaranteed through a written constitution. So, the center cannot simply take away the powers given to the states. The value shown here is devolution of power. Devolution of power means giving power to another level of government instead of keeping all the power at one level. So this table is simply showing us that democracy is not just about voting. People should be represented. They should be able to discuss and disagree. They should be able to vote. They should be able to get justice. They should be able to speak about their problems. And the government should be answerable to them. People should have a say in local decisions, and power should be shared between different levels of government. All these things help democracy work properly. Role of media in democracy. In present times, the media has become an integral part of our lives. In addition to keeping people informed about developments around the world, it serves as a voice of the masses. Newspapers, news channels, and social media platforms raise issues concerning the public and contribute to their resolution through appropriate mechanisms. Owing to its critical role in safeguarding people's voices and upholding democratic principles, media is often referred to as the fourth pillar of democracy. So, now let's understand the role of media in a democracy. Think about this. How do we know what is happening in our country or in other parts of the world? We may read it in a newspaper, watch it on a news channel, or see it on social media. So, media has become an important part of our everyday life because it keeps us informed about what is happening around us and around the world. But media does something more than just give us news. It also gives people a voice. What does that mean? Suppose people in a particular area have a problem. Maybe they are facing a problem with roads, water, pollution, or some other public issue. If that issue is reported in a newspaper, on a news channel, or through social media, many more people can become aware of the problem. The issue can then reach the concerned authorities who can take appropriate steps to deal with it. So, media can bring people's problems and concerns into public attention and help in finding solutions through the proper mechanisms. This is why media is important in a democracy. It helps protect people's voices and supports democratic principles. Because of this important role, the media is often called the fourth pillar of democracy. So, when you hear fourth pillar of democracy, remember that it refers to the important role of the media in informing people, giving people a voice, and bringing public issues to attention. Now, let's understand the different types of democracy shown in this figure. Who makes the decisions, the people themselves or the people they choose? In direct democracy, people themselves take part in making most decisions. They don't choose representatives to make every decision for them. The people directly take part in decision making. Direct democracy is easier to use in a smaller population. In a very large country, it becomes difficult for everyone to take part directly in every decision. Switzerland is an example for direct democracy. So remember, direct democracy means people directly take part in decisions. Then representative democracy, also called indirect democracy. Imagine a very large country. It is not practical for every citizen to sit together and make every government decision. So what do people do? They choose representatives through elections. These representatives make decisions and govern on behalf of the people. That is called representative democracy. People do not directly run the government. They elect people to represent them. Elections are held from time to time and the government is answerable to the people, and India is an example for representative democracy. Now, representative democracy can be organized in two important ways: parliamentary democracy and presidential democracy. In parliamentary democracy, people elect the legislature such as parliament. The executive is part of the legislature and is answerable to the legislature. India and Canada are examples of parliamentary democracy. In presidential democracy, the situation is different. The executive is independent of the legislature. The president is elected by the people and is answerable to the people. The United States of America is an example for presidential democracy. So don't get confused. Direct democracy, people themselves make most decisions. Representative democracy, people choose representatives to make decisions. Then representative democracy can be parliamentary or presidential depending on how the executive and legislature are related. You must have understood by now that though there are some fundamental principles of any democracy like freedom, equality, participation, rule of law, rights and duties, yet democracy does not offer a single model of government. The characteristics and features of democracy vary from country to country. Different societies institutionalize democracy in diverse ways, depending on how citizens participate in decision making and how political power is structured. As you have learnt in previous grades, there are different forms of democracy. Some involve direct citizen participation, while others function through elected representatives. So now we have seen that democracy can look different in different countries. But even though democracies may be different, they have some basic principles in common. For example, democracy should give people freedom and equality. People should be able to participate in decision making. The rule of law should be followed and people should have rights and duties. But does this mean that every democratic country has to have exactly the same type of government? No, democracy does not have just one fixed model. Different countries organize their democratic system in different ways. Why? Because countries have different societies and they may have different ways of allowing people to take part in decision making. They may also organize and share political power in different ways. For example, in some democracies, citizens may take part directly in making decisions. In other democracies, citizens elect representatives and those representatives make decisions and govern on their behalf. So, the important thing to understand is the basic values of democracy can be common, but the way democracy is organized can be different from one country to another. Having understood the different types of democratic systems, let us now look at how democracies function across the world. So, now that we understand the different types of democracy, let's see how democracy actually works in different countries. This table compares India, Canada, the United Kingdom, Switzerland and the United States of America. We are mainly looking at what type of democracy they have, how their government works, who is the head of state and the head of government, and some important features of their system. Let's take them one by one. India has a representative democracy and a parliamentary system. This means people elect their representatives and the government works through the parliamentary system. The president is the head of state while the prime minister is the head of government. The executive power lies with the council of ministers headed by the prime minister. India has a multi-party system, so many political parties can contest elections. India also has a written constitution which gives citizens fundamental rights and duties. India is also a federal country, meaning powers are divided between the center and the states. Federalism, a system of government in which power and responsibilities are shared between the union and the state governments as expressed in the union, state and concurrent list of the Constitution of India, and the residual power remains with union government. So now let's understand the meaning of federalism. India has different levels of government. We have the central government and the state governments. Does the central government take care of everything? No. The Constitution divides different powers and responsibilities between the union government and the state governments. For example, some matters are given to the union government, some matters are given to the state governments, and some matters can be handled by both. The Constitution puts these subjects into three lists: The union list contains subjects mainly handled by the union government. The state list contains subjects mainly handled by the state governments. The concurrent list contains subjects on which both the union and state governments can make laws. And residual form means that if a subject is not included in any of these three lists, the power to deal with that subject belongs to the union government. So, federalism means sharing power and responsibilities between the union and state governments according to the constitution. Next is Canada. Canada also has a representative democracy with a parliamentary system. Here, the executive power lies with the Prime Minister. The Governor General is the head of state. The Governor General is appointed by the monarch on the advice of the Prime Minister. Canada has federalism, meaning power is divided between different levels of government. It also has a multi-party system. Next is United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has a representative parliamentary democracy with a constitutional monarchy. What does constitutional monarchy mean? It means there is a monarch as the head of state, but the government is run through the democratic system. The Prime Minister is the head of government and the executive power lies with the Prime Minister. The United Kingdom has an unwritten constitution and a multi-party system. Sovereignty, derived from the Latin word supranus, meaning supreme. It refers to the supreme, final and independent legal authority of a state over its territory and citizens. So, the word sovereignty means having the highest and final authority. Think of a country as having its own rules and its own government. The country has the authority to make and enforce its laws within its own territory. No other country can simply come and tell it what laws to make. So, sovereignty means that the state has supreme and independent authority over its territory and its citizens. The word comes from the Latin word supranus, which means supreme or the highest. So, when we say a country is sovereign, we mean that it has the highest and independent authority to govern itself. So, in United Kingdom, the parliament has the highest lawmaking authority. Next is Switzerland. Switzerland is different from the other examples we have seen. It has direct democracy. This means that people themselves can take part directly in decision making. Its executive power lies with the Federal Council. The president is the head of government. Switzerland has a written constitution and a multi-party system. United States of America. The United States has a representative democracy with a presidential system. Here, the executive power lies with the president. The president is the head of the government. The president is independent of the legislature, which is one of the main features of a presidential system. The United States has a written constitution and mainly has two major political parties. So, all 5 countries are democracies, but they do not organize their governments in exactly the same way. India and Canada have parliamentary democracies. The United Kingdom has a parliamentary democracy with a constitutional monarchy. Switzerland has direct democracy and the United States has a presidential democracy. So, democracy can take different forms in different countries. So, with this, we have completed the part 2 of the chapter Democracy. I hope you found it easy to understand. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you again in our next video. Bye bye.